Let's pray. Dear Father, thank you for this time this afternoon again we can spend to preview the lesson for next week. We kind of touched on the rhythm of the Sabbath this morning in our lesson study, but now as we go to the next lesson, we will go into more specifics and details of the Sabbath gift that you've given to us. May we treasure the special gift you've given, where we can remember not only your creative power, but your redemptive and sanctifying power through the Spirit. Make us humble, make us teachable. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So we continue our study on rest. As we've learned in our intro, when we were processing this early on in our lesson previews, rest is a concept that covers the entire Bible, like the covenants. Rest began in the Garden of Eden, and after man's fall, there was an invitation to rest in Jesus through his pardon, through his redemption, through laying our loads to him, coming to him to find rest, all the way to the rest that will be available in the new earth. So now we come into a special focus. This morning we talked about rhythms, and there are rhythms that we need to follow in our sanctification to be closer to God. And one of the rhythms that has been established by heaven is the rhythm of the Sabbath, and it's the Sabbath rest. We'll try to focus on what the Sabbath is meant for by God, particularly in our coming lesson. So we have a book written by Matthew Sleeth, MD. He figured out the importance of a break in the week for every 7 days. You work 6 and the 7th is a break. And the only problem, he said, is we now have a 24/7 world. And everybody knows what 24/7 is. 24/7 is where you work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, non-stop, no rest. And because of technology and all the advancements that we now have in society, we tend to work ourselves to death. So he asked the question, how do we find rest in a 24/7 world? The Sabbath is about letting go of the controls 1 day a week and letting God be God by adopting the 24/6 lifestyle. As we go into the jungle of technology and try to survive within technology and use the tools to accomplish a lot of things, and there are magnificent things that has happened because of technology, we tend to think that we are in control and that we really can run the world. And the Sabbath was meant for us to remember that it's not us running the show, it is God who is actually in control. So this is a reminder that we should not be 24/7 people, we should be 24/6. Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote, the distinguished rabbi, wrote the classic The Sabbath, and there's what he said. There's a realm of time where the goal is not to have but to be, not to own but to give, not to control but to share, not to subdue but to be in accord. Life goes wrong when the control of space, the acquisition of things of space, becomes our sole concern. What we plead against is men's unconditional surrender to space. His enslavement to things, we must not forget that it is not a thing that lends significance to a moment. It is the moment that lends significance to things. You see the contrast between time and space, and he begins to introduce the importance of the Sabbath via this concept of time and space. It's worth noting the last part of this quote that he had in his book. It is not a thing that lends significance to a moment, it is the moment that lends significance to things. In other words, it is not space that's important, it is time where the space is that makes moments meaningful. So he then proceeds in saying, the meaning of the Sabbath is to celebrate time rather than space. Okay, you got to understand. Space is materialism, time has been set aside by God. 6 days a week, we live under the tyranny of things of space. On the Sabbath, we try to become attuned to holiness in time. So, at the get-go, we got to understand that the Sabbath is a special gift in time. And some writer called it the gospel in time. In the Sabbath, we find God's special presence one day each week. So we will cover in our preview 3 invitations of the Sabbath. There are 3 invitations that God gives in the gift of the Sabbath. The first invitation is to celebrate the Creator. Let's review the account in Genesis. Terry was with me in our Sabbath school lesson this morning. We kind of touched on the Sabbath. We covered some of these verses. But we want to go into more detail as to what the Sabbath was meant to be, the intention of God behind the gift of the Sabbath. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and on the 7th day God finished his work that he had done. And he rested on the 7th day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. So at the beginning of the Bible, we look at God creating the world. And what happens? After he creates the world, on the 7th day, he stopped creating. He stopped his work because he was done on the 6th day. And what did he do? He rested on the Sabbath day. He sanctified, he set it apart. So out of the 7 days, the 7th day is special. It has a special place in that rhythm, okay, in creation. And this is something very important. Genesis 1:31, we processed this during our lesson study this morning in our Zoom class. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And one of the members asked, why should it not be perfect? Okay, and the original word in Hebrew for good is pleasing. So there is an element of celebration. God did not just stop work because of inactivity. He stopped work in order to appreciate and be pleased with what he has done. The rest, we'll go back to the rest of achievement. This is the rest of achievement as opposed to the rest of inactivity. God celebrates and takes pleasure in what he has done. So it's very important. The Sabbath is not just a cessation of activity. It's not about laziness. It's not about doing nothing. Instead, the Sabbath is an active celebration and taking a delight and pleasure on things that has been accomplished by God. Okay, so how does the commandment go? Exodus 28:10. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Set it aside. Holy, sanctified means it's got a special place. It's distinct from the rest of the days of the week. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son, your daughter, your male servant, your female servant, your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. Notice I put some numbers there. The reason I put a number there is Dr. Richard Davidson had an interesting article about the Sabbath. It ran a series last year in the Adventist Review on the distinctive beliefs of the Adventist Church. But you notice, who shall not do any work in the commandment? If you count you, your son, your daughter, male servant, female servant, livestock, and sojourner, those are 7. Okay? Those are 7 entities that will have to observe the Sabbath. So, Dr. Richard Davidson goes into the Psalms, goes into the Hebrew structure, and say that 7 is embedded into all the poetry and all the literature in the Old Testament because of the blessing of the Sabbath. And you know what? And the Sabbath rest is God and man in unbroken fellowship and relationship with men, enjoying God's presence and celebrating his finished work. So everything is good. So what God said is, hey, let's take a break. Let's have a day where we can celebrate my finished creation and have fellowship with each other when he created Adam and Eve. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. That's the last part of the commandment. It is very clear that there was a creation of 6 days. Okay? The Lord made heaven and earth. But on the 7th day, God rested, and he blessed it, and he made it holy. All right, so I should say this. My condolence to Pastor Dan Botabara with the passing of Eve. She passed yesterday. There's a good friend who was a pastor of our church for the longest time, but I remember one of our pastors here, after Pastor Dan left for California, Pastor Ramon Baldovino took his place. And Pastor Mon almost left the Adventist faith, the Adventist church. He started questioning the relevance and the biblical soundness of a lot of our distinctive doctrines. And you know what took him back was the next verse. When he read Revelation 14, this is where he saw the evidence for the Sabbath. Okay? In our class this morning, in fact, yes, in Genesis 1, you will not see the word Sabbath. You will see the seventh day. You will not see the Sabbath. But the thing is, when you go to Exodus 20, verse 8, there is now an explicit mention of the Sabbath and the 6 days and the 7th day. So if you go put two and two together, you get Exodus 20 and go back to Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. You will see that after 6 days, there was a 7th day, which is called the Sabbath in the Ten Commandments. So some people always argue that's only the Old Covenant. It was given to the Israelites because the Sabbath was only there for Israel. But if you go to the Old Testament, the Sabbath has been there even before the Israelites came into view, particularly in the creation account. Right, so why is this important? And he said with a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea and the springs of water." This is very important. He's one of the most respected scholars in the Adventist ranks is John Pauline. John Pauline authored the new series that we have in Revelation. You should follow that. I think that's one of the best series in Revelation that we have. But John Pauline is recognized as one of the experts in the Society of Biblical Languages, and it's an association of biblical scholars who studies the languages of the scriptures. And in his research, he told us in his research that this particular verse has a direct allusion to Exodus 20. This verse, they say, "Worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of water." John the Revelator was actually referring to the fourth commandment in Exodus 20. Okay, so, and then he proceeds to prove that, and let's do that right now. He said there's a verbal parallel. There's a parallelism between the verbiage, the words in Revelation and Exodus 20. In 6 days, the Lord made heavens and the earth and the sea and all that is in them. Okay? And then in Revelation, you start talking about the basis of worship in Revelation 4 and 5. And two of my favorite chapters in Revelation is 4 and 5. That's the actual worship in the presence of God, where John is taken into heaven by the angel, and the curtain is rolled away, and he looks into the actual worship session in heaven, you know, with the 24 elders, the 4 living creatures, and that's fascinating. But there you see everybody worshiping God for one reason. "Worthy are you, our Lord and our God, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and because of your will they existed and were created." Why were they worshiping? Because God created. And that's the message of the first angel. Worship him and fear him because he created. Where, on what basis? He alludes to Exodus 20. And then here's the key. We'll go to this, and the question I asked, did God leave some Sabbath markers in nature even after men fell? Okay? In 1817, Robert Owen, founder of the cooperative movement, formulated the goal of the 8-hour day and coined the slogan, 8 hours labor, 8 hours recreation, 8 hours rest. You may be wondering, today in our industrial society, why do we work only 8 hours a day? Why not 10? Why not? Well, of course, some narcissists work 12 hours a day. You get 3 days in a week. But the common mode is to work 8 hours a day. Because according to research of economists and industrialists, they're not even reading the Bible. They know that the body has a rhythm to follow. You can only tolerate so much if you want to keep on going. And they said, let's give a limit of 8-hour work days for men to make it possible. Why? Because this is known. Everybody that agrees that this is real. We have a circadian rhythm. We have a rhythm for the day for each of our bodies. We talk about this, you know. Your lowest body temperature is 4 o'clock in the morning. Your melatonin secretion starts at 9 p.m. That's why you can easily go to bed and sleep that then. Your highest blood pressure is 6:30 p.m. Fastest reaction time is 3:30 p.m. This happens if you are a normal individual. That's why there is always a comment when you, especially us, when we go to a mission trip to the Philippines, we fly from America to the Philippines, and there's a 13-hour differential. And then, at least Eden, my wife, finds it very difficult to sleep because it has been shifted, the rhythm has been shifted, and this is what we call jet lag. Why is there a jet lag? Because there's a rhythm that you follow daily with your body, and that rhythm, if you violate, that somehow messes up the constitution of your physiology, and your body and your health might suffer. But what's interesting is, aside from the circadian rhythm, we have what we call a circaseptan cycle. Circaseptan has something to do with 7. Okay, let's read what Franz Halberg, the father of chronobiology, says. Chronobiology is the study of time and life, looking at the rhythms of time and looking at life. Body rhythms of about 7 days, far from being passively driven by the social cycle of the calendar week, are innate, autonomous, and perhaps the reason why the calendar week arose in the first place. You gotta find this. Body rhythms is not generated by culture. It is innate. It is within. That mark of the rhythm of 7 is within our bodies. That's what it's saying. Okay, let's read some more. Chronobiology International. It is the Journal of Biological and Medical Rhythm Research. These are scientific journals. These are not biblical commentaries. These are not biblical articles. These are scientific journals. And it says the biological requirement for rest and repair 1 day in each day, just as the circadian time is representative of the biological need for rest and repair each 24 hours. Island Reinberg, you can research this. There is a research that there's a circaseptan rhythm, a rhythm of 7 days within man, actually within nature. You know what's interesting? Most current research, Thomas Pavlicek and Pavel Rihak, and the ResearchGate, as early as May 2020 last year, when COVID hit, the oscillatory dynamics in infectivity and death rates of COVID-19. COVID-19 infectivity and death rates is revealed in many countries around the world, a typical oscillatory pattern with a 7-day circaseptan period. You remember, if you go to countries right now, quarantine begins with 7 days, or it becomes 14 days, 7 times 2. There's a rhythm of 7. In terms of the research, in terms of infectivity and in terms of mortality, somehow the circaseptan rhythm, even with COVID, comes into play. So there's a marker that God left in nature for us to understand the value of the 7th day or the Sabbath. I mentioned this to you before. Dr. Sangley, a health lecturer, a preacher, heard about bees in Brazil who were stingless. But you know what they do? They gather nectar every day except on the 7th day. They go out and gather nectar from their hives. There's no stings. They work every day, non-stop, until the 7th day comes, and they stop working. Okay. In terms of microbiology, the unicellular green algae, Acetabularia mediterranea, it has a rhythm of about 7 days. Okay. This circaseptan rhythm exists, and that the removal of the nucleus results in a circaseptan frequency multiplication. Even in the algae, you get the circaseptan rhythm. At first glance, it might seem that weekly rhythms develop in response to the 7-day week imposed by human culture thousands of years ago. However, this theory doesn't hold once you realize that plants, insects, and animals other than humans also have weekly cycles. Biology, therefore, not culture, is probably at the source of our 7-day week. We already said this before. You can explain a day astronomically with the one rotation of the Earth on its axis. You can explain a month with one revolution of the moon around the Earth. And you can explain a year with one revolution of the Earth around the sun. Astronomically, from an astronomy standpoint, you can explain that. How do you explain the 7 days in a week? You do not find an explanation in astronomy for the 7th day of the week. And people say, oh, it was because of culture. We got accustomed to having a break for every 7 days. We got that. But no, when the scientists look into this, they say within nature is a built-in circaseptan cycle, like a circadian rhythm that we follow, not only within man, but within even animals and microorganisms. Sean Pittman says this: if the 7-day week is an invention of culture and religion, as most historians would have us believe, how do we explain innate circumception rhythms in primitive algae, rats, plants, and phase flies? These forms of life have no calendar, can't read the Torah, and don't know Saturn from Santa Claus. These are not religious people. These are scientists. And they say, how in the world do we have these cycles of 7 within all these organisms, including the human body? Is this not compelling evidence for a common designer who could so powerfully program his creation to a cycle he set in motion, to a rhythm tuned to his own activity of work and rest? That's what Ken Westby says. There are marks, even outside of the Bible, within nature, that there is a cycle of 7. There's a need for this cycle as introduced by God into his creation. And you know what people did? As always, they want to prove that they're smarter than God. And there were 2 regimes, the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution. Both regimes tried to tamper with the circumception rhythm. And you know what they did? There was an attempt to obliterate the 7-day week. And during the French Revolution, they actually wanted to eliminate all traces of religion. And because the Sunday keeping and all of this observance came from the Catholic Church, they want to get rid of the Catholic Church. You talk about the capture of the Pope in 1798, was part of the French Revolution. Okay, so you know what they did? One thing that leaves an indelible mark in the minds of men is the way they reckon time and date. So let's change the date reckoning. Instead of having the sexagesimal system, which is 1 to 12, you know, the 12, we talked about this 360 and 60. Let's have a decimal week. So the decimal week ends up having 10 days a week instead of 7 days a week. Look at what they did. I'll go back to this. They gave people this watch and this clock during the time of the French Revolution, where you have a 10-day hour in the clock and then a built-in 12-hour within, so you can do the translation. And these are the translations of the 24-hour and 12-hour with the decimal system. Why? In order for them to disrupt the circumception cycle. Okay, what happened because this happened? Well, the productivity of France went down because both the mental, the physical, and economic health of the country suffered when you disrupted and tampered with the circumception cycle. They did the same thing in Russia in 1929 and 1940. They attempted to abolish religion and increase productivity. So they had a 5-day continuous work week. Did it help the economy? No. Yes, fine. Initially, it will help the economy because you got a lot more labor force. But when your labor force becomes sick, they cannot produce, and the economy suffers. So Dwight L. Moody said this: no nation has ever prospered that has trampled the Sabbath in the dust. Show me a nation that has done this, and I will show you a nation that has got it in the seeds of ruin and decay. I believe that the Sabbath desecration will carry a nation down quicker than anything else. Don't tamper with the rhythms of God. When you do that, men first suffer, and because men constitute society, society will suffer, and nations will suffer as a result of us disrupting the rhythms that God established for our lives. So how do we, the first gift of the Sabbath is saying, if that being the case, I must celebrate my Creator because there's a Creator of the world that I live in. So Psalms 8, 3 and 4 says, when I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you care for him? What are we saying here? You know, we've talked about this before. I don't want to be redundant. But there are how many stars? There's about 10 to the 24 stars in the universe, in the known universe. That's 1 plus 24 zeros. What does that mean? If you were to look for our solar system within our galaxy, which is the Milky Way, what is it? It will be the size of a quarter. That's within our galaxy alone, and there are 200 billion galaxies in the universe. So when you start looking at this, like David is saying, he didn't even have a telescope during his time. I just look at the heavens, the moon and the stars. He said, what is man that you are mindful of him? So Albert Einstein, the genius in physics, says this: we are but a speck in an unfathomably large universe. The more we gain insight into its mysterious forces, cosmic and atomic, the more we harness the huge power of these forces, the more such humility becomes an imperative. What does that mean? If you're honest with yourself, the genius of the mind of Einstein saying, who can probably understand this better than most of us, if not all of us in the world, because of his intellect, said, the more I look into this, the more I am forced and I am commanded to be humble because I am so small compared to the universe that I'm studying. I love what Louis Giglio said, sin is a way of shrinking God and puffing us up. But just a glance at the universe resizes everything. The God to be worshipped is unrivaled, uncontested, of all kinds of might and glory and power. And also, imagine yourself, God invites you in the Sabbath every week to sit down and appreciate His creative power and all of His creation. And you, with your jaw dropping, looking at God in awe, how great is my God? And through the Sabbath, you can spend time admiring the greatness of God. But not only that, we don't have a universe outside. There's also a universe inside. If you remember, one DNA, me, the reason why I'm here today, I have a human genome that figure out my height, the color of my hair, my eyes, what have you. One human genome, 4 nucleotides with 3 billion characters will take 96 years to read if read 1 character per second. If you were to read my human genome, my makeup, okay, my DNA, it would take you 96 years if you were to read it 1 character per second. A single strand of human DNA would fill a 1,000-volume encyclopedia comprising 600,000 pages with 500 words on each page. That's how complicated my makeup is. So when I look at my body and how God, you probably have seen this in our live stream, I fractured my clavicle 2 weeks ago in 2 places. It hurts. But it's amazing how my body recovers. And I look at what God has created in me, and what do I say? Psalm 139:13, for you formed my inward parts, you knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. As insignificantly small as we are compared to the universe, it's more incredible that we are marked with majesty, for we have been made in the image of God. The gift of the Sabbath gives us reason to appreciate the greatness of our creation and the intricacies of our own bodies that God has made. If I were to summarize what the first invitation is, when we rest from our work on the Sabbath, we are essentially saying, God is the ultimate provider of our needs. We trust Him to take care of us. We give up control and declare God is the one in control of our time and our resources. We don't want to relinquish control as human beings. We're very selfish. We want to take matters into our own hands every time. But God invites us. Why don't you let go and understand that I was the one who created this in the first place, and I'm in control. And if you are related to me and you know me, you don't have to worry because I'm in control. Including you. I'm in control of your life and in control of your environment. And the Sabbath was meant to invite us into that mental perspective that God is the ultimate provider of all our needs. We stop working thinking that we can provide for ourselves and earn our salaries and our living. In the Sabbath, we stop and basically say, we really can't do it. Only God can do it for us. Terry, were you asking something? You have something? No. All right, so the first invitation is to celebrate the Creator. The second invitation in the Sabbath, if you read the biblical testimony, is to remember the Redeemer. Okay, here goes. This is my favorite passage about the Sabbath. Okay, as much as I love Exodus 20 and Revelation 14, I love Deuteronomy 5 because we will see the difference of the function of the Sabbath before and after the fall because of what this said. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Okay? See, look at the commandment. It begins But it doesn't say remember the Sabbath day, but he's saying, remember that you were slaves in Egypt, when with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm I delivered you. Therefore, look, therefore the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. All of a sudden, the purpose of the Sabbath is not just to celebrate the Creator, it is now to remember your Redeemer. How important is this? Dr. Bakyoki wrote the book, Divine Rest for Human Restlessness, which I still consider one of the classics on the Sabbath. That's where he said that, after men fell into sin and we lost paradise, decay and death came into the picture. We look at the world now, which is deteriorating and decaying in front of our eyes. God set out a plan in order to redeem us through Jesus Christ. We talk about the seed and we talk about the covenants. But part of the plan is to change the function of the Sabbath, because now the Sabbath is not only a celebration of the Creator, the Sabbath is now a symbol of God's finished work of redemption in Jesus Christ. And taking us out of the slavery of sin, we are now to remember that we are redeemed in Jesus Christ in the Sabbath day. So the redemptive focus of the Sabbath, we owe a lot to the research of Dr. Bakyoki, is founded in Deuteronomy 5:15. It says that you were slaves and I delivered you with a mighty hand, therefore remember the Sabbath. Translating it into our days, you know what? You were slaves to sin. With a mighty hand I transform you and change you and save you and redeem you. Therefore, keep the Sabbath day. Whereas you celebrate God's finished work in creation, you can also celebrate God's finished work of redemption in Jesus Christ when you observe the Sabbath. This is a review, but you know what we studied, right? That they say that Matthew 11:25 to 30 are perhaps the most important verses in the Synoptic Gospels. This is coming from Cambridge University Press. This is a New Testament scholar, A.M. Hunter in Cambridge University. What Matthew 11:25, 30? Remember we studied this? Come unto me, all you that labor and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. I thank thee, Father, that you've revealed this to children. That particular passage, according to some scholars, is the most important passage in the Synoptic Gospels. Why? Because here's what Don Carson says. In Matthew 12:1, you read that, you say, at the time, Matthew then carefully points out that the Sabbath conflicts occurred at that time, presumably at or near the time when Jesus had spoken his rest. What is Carson saying? Don Carson is saying the invitation of Jesus to come unto me, all ye that labor and heavy laden, and I will give you rest, was given in the context of Sabbath conflicts. So the rest that Christ invites us to go into is based on resting on the Sabbath day. Remember the invitation? Come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, I will give you. What is that heavy load? We studied this a few Sabbaths ago. That heavy load are all the Sabbath restrictions that the Pharisees has imposed among the Jews. In order for you to really observe the Sabbath, you should not do this, you should not start a fire, you should not walk more than a mile, some of the ridiculous laws, and it has become a burden. Instead of a gift and a blessing, the Sabbath became a burden. So in that context, Don Carson is saying, when Jesus said this, come unto me, take away that burden, from your shoulders, and I will give you rest, because that rest is typified in the Sabbath command. Okay, let's expand on this some more. Remember the story of the Pharisee and the publican? What did the Pharisee say? I thank thee that I'm not like that guy. Extortionist, does all the evils. I'm so clean. It reminds us of the sermon of our pastor this morning about the self-righteous elder brother in Luke 15. And then all that the publican could say, he beat his breast, and what did he say? Oh God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And what did Jesus say? This is what Jesus said in Matthew 18:14. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. That's the biggest problem of self-righteousness, because they never recognize the finished work of redemption in Jesus Christ. They want to finish the work of redemption themselves and to take credit for what they do. And that's why the Pharisee gloats in his self-righteousness and thinks that he's accepted by God. But somebody who knows his need of redemption and forgiveness and pardon will be like the publican invoke the mercy of God. What did Blaise Pascal say? Truly it is an evil to be full of faults, but it is a still greater evil to be full of them and to be unwilling to recognize them. And that's why I love what our pastor said in his sermon this morning. In effect, the elder brother was more lost than the younger brother in Luke 15. Because at least the younger brother knew how filthy eating with the swines are. But the elder brother didn't care. He thought he had it made because everything belongs to me. He was a goody two-shoes. He was perfect. Yes,
As us as Adventists are always saying, let us take the beam out of your eye. How's that go?
yeah, that's not the children within giant. Yeah, you see the mote in your brother's eye, but you don't see the beam in your. And that's an hyperbole. How can a beam fit in your eye? But basically, Jesus is saying, oh, it's sure easy for you to point fingers. But if you will know how sinful you are before God, then you will understand the meaning of pardon and forgiveness. Yes, yes. And that's a stinging rebuke, right, to us. I mean, there's a tendency, like our pastor admitted this morning, there's a tendency for us to be self-righteous. It's so easy to have the tendency. But if you realize how much God has forgiven us, then we will understand our need of mercy.
And the person that said that she grew up in the Adventist,
Yeah. And that's one of my concerns. And I know there's been some back and forth in YouTube. Some people have made comments about our approach in teaching our lesson. There is a tendency among Adventists to think that we're it, right? Anything outside of the Adventist church is Babylon. And whether we like it or not, unintentionally, what we end up doing is being very exclusivistic and in the process become very judgmental. Anybody who doesn't smell and talk like an Adventist is Babylon, and we're better than the other guy. Oh my, if we only realize that all of us are sinners before God and only Christ can make us acceptable, then maybe we can get rid of such spiritual and denominational pride. Yeah. It's sad that Ellen White basically is saying our foremost calling is to lift up Jesus Christ. But sometimes we mistake that to lifting up the Seventh-day Adventist denomination. I got nothing against that denomination. That's the reason I'm here as part of the Advent family. But the moment our denomination takes the place of Jesus Christ, something is wrong. And one of the quickest way to do that is to concentrate on how special we are instead of how special God is. All right? So here's what Malcolm Muggeridge is saying: the depravity of man is at once the most empirically verifiable reality, but at the same time the most intellectually resisted fact. If you're honest with yourself, you're really bad. But we resist that. I'm really good, right? That's a tendency. And then C.S. Lewis candidly said when he wrote, for the first time, I examined myself with a seriously practical purpose. He said, fine, I'll be honest and look at myself, have a self-inventory. What did he find? What did he find? And there I found what appalled me: a zoo of lust, a bedlam of ambitions, a nursery of fears, a harem of fondled hatreds. My name was Legion. Yeah, remember Legion, the demoniac with legions of evil spirits? You know, C.S. Lewis, look at me, I'm an Oxford professor. I look decent to you, but when you look at my heart, it is like a zoo of lust, a bedlam of a nursery of fears, a harem of fondled hatreds. I am a sinner through and through. You realize that you will need Jesus Christ. Yes, and nothing. That's why I call total depravity. Not a single square inch of our body is not affected by sin. And that's why it's a wonder how people can gloat in their self-righteousness despite their sinfulness. That's why what did Jesus say? It's very telling. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Jesus is saying, are the Pharisees and scribes righteous? Oh, yes, they are. But their righteousness cannot come up to the standard of God, because the standard of God is absolute perfection in Jesus Christ. Who was the only one who was perfect and good? Only Jesus. Only Jesus can be accepted by God. And how can you be righteous alone? If you get and accept and receive that righteousness by faith, the perfect righteousness of Jesus becomes yours. If you combine all the righteousness of the Pharisees during the time of Jesus, they will not even come close to the righteousness of Christ. How does one put it when one pastor and evangelist said, okay, let's go outside one night when the moon is shining in its brightness. Let's pick up stones. And everybody tried to hit the moon with a stone. You know, of course, the one with a stronger right hand or stronger hand will probably throw the stone higher. But can anybody hit the moon? There's no way, because the standard is so high. And that's righteousness. God says, be ye holy because I am holy. You know, the standard of righteousness is so high, we can't even reach that. And yet people think that they can. Oh, here comes the relationship with the Sabbath. Okay? So then there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For whoever has entered God's rest has also rested from his works as God did from his. Watch this very carefully. What does the author of the book of Hebrews say? You know, if you enter into Sabbath rest, you rest from your works the way God did from his. What was he saying? You rest from trying to save yourself. Because God has already finished the work of redemption in Jesus Christ. You don't have to try to save yourself. It's already done. Why do you try to accomplish what has already been accomplished in Jesus Christ? So like God rested, you know, God rested in the work of creation. He also rested in the work of redemption. We must rest from our works. Trying to save ourselves will not cut it. We must depend on Jesus Christ. Remember, Dr. Bakyogi asked this so very significantly. Why did Jesus not rise from the dead over the weekend, you know, on a Saturday? Why did he have to wait till Sunday morning to rise from the dead?
Because he said so.
Okay, well, that's one of the that's one of the answers. And then Dr. Bakio asked a very pointed question. What was Jesus doing on Saturday? Oh, he was resting. Why in the world was he resting? All right, okay, but I mean, what did he say on the cross? It is finished. So as God rested in creation, that's what Hebrews 4 is saying. Somewhere he said that after the 6 days of creation, he accomplished the creation work. He rested. So did Jesus, after dying on the cross, saying it is finished, he rested because the work of redemption has been finished and completed. That's what he's saying. In the Sabbath, you tell God, Lord, I cannot save myself. I am so sinful. There is no hope in me. But I thank you because of what Jesus has done. He has accomplished the work of redemption. All I need to do is receive and trust him, and I will be saved. That's what you do on the Sabbath. So the Sabbath is not only what you do in celebrating creation, it is also a reminder of your Redeemer. We already talked about this, John 19:30, when Jesus had received the sour wine, he said it is finished, and he bowed his hand and gave up his spirit. He said it is finished, and you know what happened when he said it is finished, right? You read the Gospels, the veil of the temple was rent in two, right? People can go into the throne room. The most holy place is no longer restricted because Jesus entered into heaven itself. We talk about that. And then if you want to relate back to Deuteronomy 5:15, where you were slaves, and I delivered you with a mighty hand, therefore remember the Sabbath. This is what Romans 4 and 5 says. Now to the one who works, his wages are not counted as a gift, but as his due. If you work for it, it will not be a gift anymore. Okay? And to the one who does not work but believes in him who justifies the ungodly, his faith is counted as righteousness. The contrast that Paul is trying to say, you can try to work for your righteousness, and when you work for your righteousness is no longer a gift. It is your due because you work for it. And the Bible again and again says that salvation is a gift from God. It is given by grace. That's why it says in Galatians 4 and 5, same book, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law so that we might receive adoption as sons. And because you are sons, God has sent the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father, so you are no longer a slave. There you go. But a son, and if a son, then an heir through God. The fulfillment of the Sabbath in the gospel of Jesus Christ is saying, because you are now sons because of what Christ has done. You are no longer a slave. Well, this is amazing. I did not plan this, but it correlates to the sermon of the pastor this morning. The elder brother treated himself like a slave and a servant, when in fact he was a son. And Jesus is saying, through the Sabbath you will realize, because the work of redemption is done, you have been freed. You are no longer a slave. You are my child. You're my son. I love the way Tim Keller puts it. The Sabbath is therefore a declaration of our freedom. It means you are not a slave, not to your culture's expectations, not to your family's hopes, not to your career demands, not even to your own insecurities. In the Sabbath, you are no longer a slave. You are freed from all these entanglements in your life, because in Jesus, you are now a child of God, and you're freed from any slavery that the enemy has imposed upon you. Okay, there's another angle to remembering your Redeemer. Remember when the Egyptians finally relented and let the Israelites go? That was the 10th plague, right? That was the beginning of the Passover feast. What's the Passover feast? Remember? The death angel goes in the midnight in both the Egyptian and the Israeli camp, and he looks at the doorpost and the lintel, and he finds blood. What does the angel do? The angel passes over the house, and nobody dies. And of course, Pharaoh's firstborn, the cattle died. And finally, Pharaoh, after the 10th plague, relents. And then this is what Exodus 12:27 says, you shall say, it is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, for he passed over the houses of people of Israel in Egypt. And when he struck the Egyptians, but spared our houses, and the people, what did they do? They bow their heads and they worship. All right? Get it? They worship. Next. Finally, Pharaoh calls Moses and Aaron into the palace. Get out. You and your Israelites. Leave my country. Go and what? Worship the Lord as you ask. What was the purpose of God giving the Sabbath, in liberating the Israelites? So that they can worship. What's the meaning here? Worship Him as both Creator and Redeemer. Here comes the extension of what John Paul says. And I mentioned this earlier. It was Pastor Baldivino who was here. It was this reading and study that pulled him back into Adventism. There's a thematic parallel. There's the 3 motivations to obedience in Revelation 14. Remember? Eternal gospel, the salvation, you got judgment, artist judgment, creation. Look at what the verse says. Then I saw another angel flying directly overhead with an eternal gospel, that's salvation. And he said with a loud voice, the hour of his judgment is come, there's judgment, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of water. All right? So you got the parallels of salvation, judgment, and creation. What happens in Exodus 20? There are 3 motivations to obedience. Okay, what are those motivations? I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. That's salvation. Visiting the iniquity of the fathers and the children. That's judgment. The Lord made the heavens and the earth. That's creation. This is amazing. You look at Revelation 14 and Exodus 20. The parallels are there. You cannot mistake the allusion of John the Revelator to the Sabbath commandment. Now, there is a structural parallel. This is where worship comes in. The remnant are characterized as those, or what are the 2 traits of the remnant? Those who keep the commandments of God, okay? And so the dragon was enraged with the woman and went off to make war with the rest of her children who keep what? The commandments of God and hold on to the testimony of Jesus. So there's a structural parallel. Note what Revelation is saying. This is brilliant, what John Paul explained here. Commandments is the 10 commandments, right? Okay? And something's happening in Revelation 12, 13, 14, and 15. What's going on there? There's a beast. Okay? And there's a sea beast, there's a land beast. And according to Revelation, there will be a move to worship the beast. And people will make an image to the beast. And then there will be blasphemies coming from the mouth of the beast. And then there will be the mark of the beast. It said, if you do the structural parallelism here, says John Paul, you end up having the first commandment saying, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Worship the beast. Thou shalt not make any graven images. Make an image to the beast. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord again. Blasphemy is coming from the beast. And what is the next parallel? It is remember the Sabbath day. And if all of these are counterfeit worship, these are worship of the beast, worship of the image of the beast, and blasphemies of the beast, what happens to the mark of the beast? Something will be enacted in the end to counterfeit the Sabbath command that remembers God as creator and God as redeemer of man. All right? I will have no time to discuss the rest of this stuff, but it is very interesting. This part of Dr. Richard Davidson's article, it says, the pineal gland, Kenneth Greenaway had the pineal project, is in some animals not only has a circumceptant 7-day rhythm, but this rhythm highlights a specific day of the week, Saturday. In case of rats, for example, Volrat et al. Found that the pineal gland releases its calming and mood-enhancing melatonin maximally on Saturdays. All right? It's amazing, huh? You know what melatonin is, right? Melatonin, yeah, the sleep hormone, right? They researched this coming from the pineal gland. For some reason, when they look at the mice, what happened? It releases a maximum calming and mood enhancing, level of melatonin on Saturdays. Okay, so give it whatever you want to give it, but the bottom line is when God gave the Sabbath, He also specified the seventh day as the Sabbath. Now, I don't want to go into an extended discussion of that, but you will know, we talk about Dr. Bakyoki and all, but the bottom line is, in the end, says the Revelation, the test will be on observing the right observance of the Sabbath, okay, in order for us to truly worship God. The issue is worship. The issue is not just the first and seventh day. The issue is, will you worship God or will you worship the beast? Will you worship the image of the beast and listen to the blasphemies and follow the beast or the counterfeit Sabbath of God? And that's the issue that will be a test, the final test in the end. Takes us to the last part. The third invitation is not only to celebrate the Creator, remember the Redeemer, is to savor our Sanctifier. Right? What does it say? Moreover, I gave them my Sabbaths as a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am the Lord who sanctifies them. What's the purpose of the Sabbath? Exodus 20 in the chapter. So that people will know what? That God sanctifies us, that develops and forms us spiritually. Okay, this is Christian maturity. And then later on, in another 8 verses down in Exodus 20, Ezekiel 20:20, keep my Sabbaths holy, that they may be a sign between me and you, that you may know that I am the Lord your God. How are you sanctified? You are sanctified by knowing God. Okay, it's very, very clear here. You know, it's a sign that I am your God, your sanctifier. And if you keep my Sabbath, you may know that I am the Lord your God. Okay, what is this know? Let's review this. In John 17:3, Jesus said, and this is eternal life, that they know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom you have sent. If you take that verb, know, and take it from the Greek and the Hebrew, and find out what that means, it will take you to a verse in the Bible, in Genesis 4:1. It says, and Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. What's here? Look at the word know here, the verb know. Adam knew Eve, and what? And Eve conceived. So what is know here? Is it very plain? Know is the physical relationship, the most intimate relationship between a man and a woman. And that's what's being used in John 17:3. Eternal life is knowing God so intimately, it's a delightful knowledge. And that's what salvation is about. This is very powerful. That's why you worship, because of that intimate relationship with God. And let's read. Yes, go ahead.
Jews, they keep the Sabbath because they truly don't know God.
That's exactly the point. That's why the Sabbath became a burden. And that's why Jesus had to invite them, come unto me, and I will give you rest.
Because if you go back to worship God, if they really knew God, the biggest problem was idolatry.
Sure. And if they really knew God, they will delight in Him. Because, the root word, know, here, you know what it means. It's delightful relationship between a man and a woman. And that should be a relationship with God in the spiritual realm. They never knew that. They were burdened. They were burdened with the Sabbath, rather blessed by the Sabbath. Let's not be so high with our snouts, says the pastor, because within Adventism, we can be so guilty and do the same thing with our Sabbath. I kind of said this. Yesterday, I participated in a discussion of the Sabbath in one of the live sessions in Facebook with a bunch of ministerial graduates and teachers. And you know what the discussion was? How do you observe the Sabbath? What should you avoid doing on the Sabbath? What should I inhibit myself? Why should I prevent myself from doing in the Sabbath? In other words, how do I burden myself on the Sabbath day instead of giving you rest and delight and celebration? And that's where I kind of suggested. I said, when Jesus spoke about the Sabbath in the Gospels, did Jesus ever say don't? No. It was very positive. It is good to save lives on the Sabbath, right? I mean, look at this woman who's been bounded by the enemy for years. Shouldn't she be freed on the Sabbath day? Jesus always said, this you should do on the Sabbath day and celebrate the Sabbath with me. It's a positive imaging. But the concept of the Jews was, you should not do this, you shouldn't do this. All prohibitions. I always say this, and we played the game among Adventists where we get a big stick. You heard about this. Sunset Friday, what do? You push the sun up because you don't want the sun to set first, because you will stop. You will not be able to do anything. You're going to watch TV, you're going to do this thing, and then by the time Saturday afternoon comes, what you do? You stick the stick and pull it down so that the Sabbath will be done and I can do my thing. What a perverted view of the Sabbath. The Sabbath was given as a gift, and we look at this as a burden. That's what's ironic. We're so good in the seventh and first day debate, but we've never really valued the meaning of the Sabbath as a people. I mean, traditionally, at least from my own experience.
Then in that context of what you said is pushing.
Yes.
Are we true?
Because you don't want the Sabbath. I mean,
Are we true keepers of the Sabbath?
well, yeah, that's the point. I mean, if you don't want the Sabbath, you don't want God as your creator, God as your redeemer, and as your sanctifier. What are you then if you don't want to appreciate God's creation, redemption, and sanctification? Do you even know Him? That's the point. If you don't delight, you probably don't know Him. Why? Because here's the two favorite verses I have. Watch these two verses. Isaiah 58. I like the Message, translate the paraphrase. If you watch your step on the Sabbath and don't use my holy day for personal advantage, if you treat the Sabbath as a day of joy, God's holy day as a celebration, if you honor it by refusing business as usual, making money or running here and there, which is very clear, right? Take away all of your distractions and all you think that you can achieve, all your self-made works and achievements and ambition. Take that out. What will happen? Look.
What is that version, MSG?
The Message. The Message is the paraphrase.
It's a new
Yeah, it's a paraphrase, okay? But look at what happens in English Standard Version, which I always use. Okay? Then you shall take what? Look, what does it say there, Terry? Then you shall take delight in the Lord, and I will make you ride on the heights of the earth. I will feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. Watch this very carefully. What does Isaiah say? If you will get rid of all the distractions in your life and spend time with me, you will find delight in me. So why are you supposed to stop all of this work? Not to give yourself a hard time. You're stopping all of this so you can concentrate and focus your attention on God. And if God is your treasure, you will delight in Him. It's amazing. The Sabbath is connected directly to delighting in the Lord. Okay, what's that? What is your favorite verse for worship? Remember this? Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. This is the essence of worship. Finding delight in God. And what's this very careful? The last 3 slides. Through the Sabbath, you'll be able to find delighting in God. Through the Sabbath, you can worship God.
Was He not talking to the Jews at that time? And they had so many crazy stuff they did on the
No.
Sabbath itself.
Yes.
Selling and buying stuff in the temple, harlots in the temple.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, Isaiah, when we studied, remember we studied Isaiah. When Isaiah wrote this, it was still years before the Babylonian captivity, but this was prophetic. And remember what happened when the Babylonian exiles came back, right? And Nehemiah built the walls. Remember what they did to the Sabbath, right? They desecrated the Sabbath. You read, we studied in Nehemiah, Esther, and Nehemiah. On the Sabbath day, all the people came, to sell merchandise right at the wall of Jerusalem. Can you imagine going to church? By the time you go out of church, they're selling fish. They're selling all the merchandise when you're doing the recessional in church. That was what's going on. And Nehemiah was so mad. He got rid of that. Because they were always doing the Sabbath for themselves. They're doing it for business. You're utilizing your righteousness to get brownie points. But what is Jesus saying to Isaiah? But if you will stop and be present with me. Let me go back to what Pastor said this morning. Remember the conversation between the elder son and the father? The son said, I've never disobeyed you. I've obeyed you. Perfect record. You haven't even killed a goat for me. And then this son of yours, not even his brother, he wasted his living in harlots. What do? You kill the fatted calf. You know what the fatted calf is? You spend years to make that calf ready for a big, big celebration. You didn't even kill a goat for me. Imagine he spent his whole life just for a goat. That's crazy, right? That's what. And how many of us spend our whole life trying to keep the Sabbath for a goat from God? And what did the father say? My son, I'm always with you, and all that I have is yours. What is he saying? He's saying, it's not the goat, it's not the fatted calf, it's your presence and my presence with its other that really counts. You're missing it. You think you're a slave, but you are my son. I've always been with you. You know why people don't enjoy the Sabbath? They come to the Sabbath as a slave. A slave that can't do anything because it's a Sabbath day. I'm enslaved by God.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, what you always say it's a heart thing. Maybe we don't have a true heart. Maybe we don't have that know that we think we know.
Yes.
Just like the pastor said today.
Yeah.
That was a great sermon.
Yes. And you know what? There, right? The reason why we don't have a heart is we're absent to God. What's this? I love this. When I was reading, I had a series on Manila and spiritual disciplines. God is always present, right? Because God is always there. He's always in our lives. But the problem is, sometimes we're absent to Him. Do you get it? I mean, He's there, but we don't give Him a time of day. I'll give you an illustration. Just use the cell phone, right? Don't go anywhere. Just use the cell phone. Is it possible for you to be with somebody and that somebody's not with you? Because he spends 1 hour looking at the cell phone, not even looking at you, not even minding what you say. So that person is present with you, but you're not present. He's not present with you in terms of here. So that's why that little girl started pulling on the apron of her mom, doing something in the kitchen. Mom, look at me, listen to me. Yes, honey, I'm hearing you. Then he pulls to mom, no, mom, I want you to listen to me with your eyes. What is he trying to say? That's why we talked about this before. Attention is the beginning of devotion. Don't forget that. If you're not willing to give God attention, you will not learn what devotion is like. So if God promises His presence with us, unless you pay attention to His presence and cherish that presence with you, you will never find delight in Him. It's true, especially when you don't pay attention to God. You're distracted by cell phone, by technology. You don't have time to pray. You don't go to God. And all of a sudden, you got a problem in your life. You blame God. And then you tell God, where are you? You see, I need you. Now, are you really God? Why did you leave me? And then God says, oh, my son, my daughter, I've always been here. But you were not. And that's why Dr. James Ford Jr. had a marriage seminar, and he said he was driving one day with his wife, sitting in front. You remember those days when you didn't have like single seats in the car? There's only one row. That car, driving, and say the wife said, Oh, we're not like we were before. Used to be when you drive, you put your arms around me. I was close to you when you're driving. Now, you're really far, says the wife. And you know what Dr. James Ford said? Hey, I haven't moved. I'm still here. Who moved? You know what I was trying to say? That's what God is trying to say. I've never moved. I'm here. But if you don't find delight in being present with me, and if your job, your accomplishment, your toys are more important to you than me, you'll never find delight in me. And if you don't find delight in me, you will never enjoy the Sabbath. Because the Sabbath is an opportunity to say, I'm going to get your attention. Okay, take away all your distractions. Focus on me. And I'm telling you, if you focus on my presence, you will have joy like never before. And that's where the secret of the Sabbath is there. And unfortunately, because we're so preoccupied with our accomplishment and what we do, we never go into the bliss and the delight of the presence of God in our lives. That's why a lot of people who know the value of being present with God cherishes the Sabbath. They can hardly wait for the Sabbath to come because they can throw away everything. Forget all this. One pastor saying, actually what they're practicing in their family, they shut down all technology. Sunset Friday. That means cell phone is off, TV is off, everything. This is just a break with God where they have devotion as a family, they worship, and they go to nature and enjoy the presence of God. Tough to do that today, especially with the drive of technology and all.
So how as a church can we
Good question, because hopefully towards the end of this presentation, I'll give you some pointers on doing that. Because it helped me. It helped me, myself. It's very important, okay? And remember, this is my basic proposition for the entire quarter. What is the definition of rest? This is the definition of rest in the Bible. What does it say? Exodus 33:14. My presence will go with you, and what? And I will give you rest. Rest is not possible without the presence of God. You get it? That's the premise. You want rest? You're so weary, you're so overburdened, overloaded, you want rest. Hey, recognize my presence. I'm here with you. Rosie and Lily is with us today because of adventurers. And Rosie came to me the other day and said, Grandpa, is it true that at night there are a lot of animals, that might go to the house? So I told her, don't worry, the door is closed, the window is closed, the animals cannot get in. And then she goes and hugs me and said, Grandpa, do you always take care of us? You love those comments. But that's it. Jesus is saying, the only way you can have security and rest is to know that I'm present with you. My presence is with you. Be present in the presence. Don't be absent in my presence. And you know what Psalm 16:11 says, right? You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. If you know the presence of God, you will know joy and pleasure. How in the world can you tell me that the Sabbath is a burden if you know that the Sabbath is enjoying the presence of God? Yeah, I'll still answer your question. I haven't answered practical applications. This is what Augustine said. Thou movest us to delight in praising thee. For thou hast formed us for thyself, and our hearts are restless till they find their rest in thee.
I saw that somewhere before.
Yeah, maybe you saw it here. But I mean, people miss the first part here. They always quote the last part. I've seen people do this from as renowned speakers as Tim Keller and all. They only quote the last part. They miss the first part. What's the first part? Augustine says, you are the one who moves us to delight. There you go. You cannot move ourselves to do it. God moves us to delight in praising Him. And you know what? We remain restless until our hearts find their rest in God. All right? So I'm beginning to answer your question now, Terry. How do I find that delight and the rest? Oh, we will find it in God. How do you do that? Here goes. How do you find that rest? In Hebrews 4:11 is an oxymoron if you don't understand it in context. Let us therefore what? Strive. I thought we were resting. Why are we striving? Actually, the word there is to strain and really do everything that you can in order to what? To enter. How do you enter the rest? It is to strive. Wow, I mean, what kind of rest is that? So that no one may fall by the same sort of disobedience. There's an explanation. All right, let's jump to here before I go there. Jesus answered them and said, "This is the work of God." Follow me carefully. This is your striving. What is the work of God? To keep the Sabbath? Nope. To obey the commandments? Nope. That you believe in Him whom He has sent. What is the work? The work is to believe and trust Jesus, all right? Hold your horses. We're still trying to answer the question. That's why surrender is not a battle of the will. It is an act of worship. As Romans 12:1 says, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. This is true worship. True worship is to offer yourself to God. How do you offer it? By surrendering yourself to God. That is your striving to rest. If you strive to surrender yourself to God every day, then you will understand what that rest will be about. But remember, who moves us to do that? God moves us to do it, okay? And what's that?
Islam.
Oh, Islam. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know. I know what you're trying to say. But here's my answer to your question, finally, Terry. You need to do it by trying. If you try, you will fail eventually. But you do it by training. You know what training means? Yeah, I wanted to run the marathon. I probably won't be able to do that now at my age, okay? But before I had my accident, I decided to at least take a 2-hour walk every day, okay, before the winter comes, because it really helps you. But since I haven't walked for the longest time, I found it difficult to walk for 2 hours a day. So what do? I don't walk for 2 hours right away. I only walk for 30 minutes. And then the following day, I walk for about 60 minutes, and I go. You want to run the marathon? Can you be a marathoner tomorrow? No. You first run your mile before try to do it in a week. And after the first week, you go to 2 miles the second week, okay? You stretch this. And a lot of people are saying if you're young enough to be a marathoner, it will take you at least 6 months to train in order to run the marathon. Then and only then, when you have trained, can you say, I am a marathoner. In the Christian life, it's the same. Unless you train, you cannot say, I am mature enough to be your servant, Lord, to glorify your name. How do you do that? Here comes my practical answer. How do you allow God to move your heart for Him? Here. This is what I said in Manila. We studied this for the last 4 weeks. And I left this with the congregation in Manila. You must have unforced rhythms of grace in your life. You must develop habits that will allow you to be trained in the life of God. The first habit you need to develop is slow down. I preach an entire sermon in church about slowing down, being a speed addict. Busy does not necessarily mean hurry. Those are two different ones. Jesus was very busy, but He was never in a hurry. Slow down. Learn to wait on the Lord. Don't force issues, you know. And when you wait on the Lord, it means even if you don't feel Him right now, wait on Him. They who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength, right? Slow down. Don't be in there. You think by accomplishing things so fast, you're getting brownie points. No, slow down. What does the Bible say? Be still and know that I am God. Second rhythm that you need to develop in your life is solitude. You got to spend quiet time with God every day. How in the world can you be a Christian without a prayer life? Alistair Begg is saying, a prayerless soul is a Christless soul. You cannot be a Christian and not have a prayer life. And what does A.W. Tozer says? Prayer is not the preparation for the battle, it is the battle. So every day, begin your day with a quiet time with God. What do? You spend time, and as opposed to Eastern meditation, you fill your minds with God's word and meditate on it till you memorize some of those verses, and you react with your heart and your mind into the truths of God. You do that every day. And what else? You don't only pray once a day. One guy saying, how many times did Daniel pray? 3 times. And one pastor is suggesting, don't just have quiet time in the morning. When you're working, maybe spend a couple minutes or 10 minutes, 5 minutes at work during lunchtime. During lunchtime, have a session with God. And then in the third, what else? During that, before you leave work, here's the bottom line. I kind of said this. You know that interruptions are portals to communion with God. Example, you're in Walmart, you're doing shopping. And you want to check out, you got a cartload of stuff. You're going to just go to the, check-in, self-check counter. So you got to go in line. And turns out, when you go in line, these are 100 feet long. Right? So, nuts, you'll be here forever, because you don't know how to slow down. You know what one writer said? Do you realize that interruptions are portals to communion with God? Have you ever thought that while you're waiting in line, you can talk to God in your minds? Have you ever thought that if you develop that rhythm and that attitude and that habit, that once the moment you can grab an opportunity to talk to God in your mind, even at the counter in Walmart, or even at the gas station while you're waiting for your turn, have you ever thought that you will be in the presence of God and you will find the line in Him? Will He then move you to follow? Oh yes, He will. That's the time when you say, Lord, come into my life and move me so I can follow you. But that doesn't come by trying. It comes from training. If you do that, the more you do that, the more habit forming it is, the more you talk to God in your mind. And then simplicity. This is very important. Oh my. A lot of people got hit when we studied this in Manila. One of the biggest problems in America is clutter. A lot of Americans cannot park in their driveway. You know what? You know what they did to their driveway? They stuff all the goods there. There's not enough room to park the car. Instead of becoming a garage for the car, it becomes a warehouse of what they shop for. You know what they've proven? If there's so much clutter in your life, you will lack sleep. You'll tend to be more miserable, non-productive, even depressed when you do that. So what's the rule? I call it 2 Ds. The first D is declutter your life. Simplify. He said, start going to your rooms in your house one at a time. Go to your closet and ask the question, do I really need this? If I don't need this, I can either sell it or give it away. And one pastor did this for the last 6 months, and you know how much simpler his life was? It was less clutter. Because there's less clutter, there's less distraction, and you can pay more attention to God. And in how? And of course, aside from decluttering, the other D is to donate or to give. It's more blessed to give than to receive. Jesus is saying the antidote to greed in the heart, in the human heart, is to give. You start giving to people and decluttering your life. Make that a habit. If somebody's in need, respond to the person who's in need and give. And start taking away the clutter, because a lot of the clutters you can even offload and give it to people who are in need. And that's simplification. And John Mark Comer is saying, the opposite of simplicity is not complexity. The opposite of simplicity is superficiality. You get it? How many things in life do you have that you really don't need? Things are superficial. So if you simplify, there'll be more depth, and we have less distraction, more time with God. And of course, the fourth habit is the Sabbath. And follow me carefully. This is a direct answer to your question now, Terry. If you learn to develop these rhythms in your life of slowing down, of solitude, silence with God, prayer time with Him, of simplicity, So he looked, Terry, by the time you get to the third rhythm that you develop, you're enjoying the presence of God. And you know how thrilling it is to be present with God every day. And because that is so thrilling, you look forward to the Sabbath because you know, oh Lord, you know, all this week I've been working. I gotta work for my family to survive. That's part of the curse of sin. But man, when the Sabbath comes, I will have more time, dedicated time for me to be in your presence. Because I've slowed down, I got solitude, and I've simplified, I will delight thoroughly in the Sabbath. And I'll be closer to God. And you know what? When you do this, you'll start training. And when you start training, you will wake up one day and you'll see how marvelous it is to be matured in the knowledge and grace of God. That's a practical answer, Terry. It's not like a magical formula. I'll be a good Sabbath keeper today. No. Learn to enjoy God's presence. That's what it means to strive. What's the mean? To strive to enter the rest. What does it mean? Train. You must train to enter God's way. How do you train? Focus your attention on God. And there are habits you can develop in order for that to happen. And I promise you, when you develop these habits, it'll be so thrilling in your life. So I'll give you an example of my own experience. You know that we finally gave the new slate of officers to the church, right? And you heard me read those names twice. It was very difficult to do that because not everybody says, a lot of people said no. And to follow that up, to get ready for the reading of the church. And you know, I said, oh, the pastor's coming like the 1st of August. I got to get done with this, you know, so that when the pastor comes, the officers are ready. Oh, we didn't have all the yeses that we need, and we couldn't do it. So one weekend, I was talking to Elmer, who was part of the MMT, the nominating committee, and said, well, we haven't gotten a yes from this guy. And you know what I told him? Oh, I've learned from my study of the scriptures to slow down. I said, you know, I gave myself my own deadline. And then I rushed towards the deadline. Oh, it's got to be done before the pastor comes here. Who gave you that deadline? What if God says, hey, maybe there's some consideration. Maybe you need to wait another couple of weeks for this to happen. And it did. It said, I'm done with that. I told Elmer, I'm done with that. I'm not making my own deadlines now. I will ask God what his deadline is. And then I will work within his timetable. And I will slow down, communicate with him, make sure that it is direction that I'm following. You know how liberating it is? And one pastor who did this, and I don't even want to mention the name anymore, but the pastor who did this was a pastor of a mega church. His church is like over 5,000 members. In a matter of 5 years, they were growing 1,000 members a year. Then they ended up having with 93 people in the staff. And he said, everybody thought we were successful. Then he said, but I was rotten to the core. I had no rest. And you know, his contemporary, a pastor, who was also a megachurch pastor, committed suicide. Because there was no rest. They never followed these rhythms of God that was given to us so we can rest in him. And this is the promise. If we only do this, you will see how God moves in your heart and molds your heart, and you can have a heart for him. I'll skip this. We'll probably cover this in the next lesson. But that's the coverage of the Sabbath. The purpose of the Sabbath is basically to enjoy the presence of God and delight in him so that you can really worship him. But like you brought up, Terry, I will never enjoy that delight if I do not cherish the moments I have with God every day and develop the rhythm in my life so that I really treasure my communion with God every day. I treasure his presence even at work. While I'm driving, while I'm in a meeting, I talk to God. I have portals in my mind where I talk to him. That's what it means to pray without ceasing. And when you treasure that communion with God and the presence of God in your life, the Sabbath will be very meaningful to you. I don't have to go far. You know how Stacy has been so blessed by God. You know, she's now in the business world. She's finishing her second master's. But she goes to New York one weekend because there was a business trip that he needed to do. And she was part of our small group. And you know what she did while we were studying the Bible Friday night? She was in Manhattan, in Broadway. She used the iPad to join us, FaceTime, in our meeting. And her friends were telling, what you doing? What you doing? These guys were into their happy hour, you know. A lot of those business partners that they had, you know, they were like having partners, 2-3 partners in a week. That's the way they live their life in New York. And all of a sudden, you see somebody studying the Bible Friday night when in fact you should be spending the happy hour in the bars in New York. And of course, Stacy was saying, you don't understand. I could hardly wait for the Sabbath because that's the time I can be present with God. Now that changes. That changes the story, right? It's no longer pulling the sun down or pushing us up. It's now about being present with God. And that present is so intimate. It's so joyful and delightful. It's the knowledge that Jesus says in the Bible, where Adam and Eve knew each other and Eve conceived. If you're so, the delight that only God can give you, that the world can never give you, is possible if you are present with God. And I thank God because through the Sabbath, that becomes possible. A full day that has been marked by God in time where we can celebrate our Creator, remember our Redeemer, and savor our Sanctifier. And through the Sabbath, we will understand what it means to be present with God and to truly delight in Him. Right, any more questions? I hope that answers yes. Yes.
Strive is jihad.
What was that?
Jihad and strive.
Well, what is your point, Benji? Jihad is like holy war, right?
Holy war in everything. For Muslims.
Yeah, and
Christians, we have to strive.
if I were to learn something what's going on right now, did you read about the Operation Pineapple in Afghan? It happened the other day. Because the country has not taken definitive steps to actually free they're saying there were over 61,000 commandos of Afghan commandos who worked alongside U.S. troops to maintain the peace in Afghanistan for years. And the Pledge of Allegiance, supposedly, the understanding between these forces was, if something happens to my Afghan brother, whether he's an informant or an elite commando, I should give my house to my brother. He's my my fighting partner. And if I need to give my life, I should give my life. And there is a group of elite military people who volunteered themselves outside of the government sanction to liberate over 600 elite commandos of the Afghans because they were brothers and sisters through all the checkpoints in Afghanistan today. They were willing to give their lives so that they can be free. Okay, it's an illustration that I didn't intend to use, but that's what the Sabbath is all about, right? Jesus said to go through all the battle, whether you call it jihad or not, and stake his own life, actually gave his own life so that we can be freed from what we have. But how in the world can you not delight in having a Savior like that?
I think it's all these goals and just the other day, you know when you're a person, when you have faith, when you're brilliant, you give it all and give your life to Christ.
Yes, and you know how we get to that, Terry, right? When you get so consumed by the greatness of God's love. And that's why when I was talking to Pastor, you know what I've been appreciating in your sermon, the last 3 Sabbaths? You've raised up the love of God, the extravagance of God's love. And nothing is more powerful in the universe than to move the heart than the greatness of God. And when you do that, oh my, it's a lot easier to surrender everything to Him.
Daniel, when he prayed in the window, God,
Yeah, because for Daniel, who cares about your life? This is not yours. It has been bought by Jesus Christ. And if you trust God, He runs your life, whether in death, in death or life, it doesn't matter. You'll find contentment.
You know, we used to always ask that question, how many people are willing to die for the Sabbath?
Yeah.
Daniel was willing to die just to stand
For a silly law. Yes. For prayer. Actually, dying for the Sabbath should be translated more precisely by saying, are you willing to die for spending time in the presence of God, right? If the presence of God is so valuable to you, you will not give up that presence of God in your life, even if it calls for your own life. That's the reason why we have martyrs for them. I'd much rather be present with God than to have my life preserved and deny Him. That's what they're saying. So I hope you guys got something very practical here, but the Sabbath is one of the key points. Like I said, to make the Sabbath more meaningful, practice these rhythms. Practice slowing down, spend time with God every day, simplify your life, and then as soon as you appreciate God's presence throughout the whole week, the Sabbath becomes very more meaningful to you. And then you will know what the psalmist said, delight yourself in the Lord, and what? And He will give you the desires of your heart. It's a secret of worship. Let's bow our heads in prayer. Dear Father, thank you for a wonderful lesson. Oh Lord, our concept of the Sabbath for so long has been so warped, so that the Sabbath has become a burden. And we have not found rest for a gift that was meant to give us rest. Lord, teach us to value your presence and practice these rhythms in our lives, to train in our discipleship, to be in your presence every day, to be attentive to you. And be aware that the Sabbath is one of the most precious gifts you're given, so that we can celebrate you as our Creator, remember you as our Redeemer, and savor you as our Sanctifier in praise and worship. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.